All the apps that we've built so far have one thing in common. They only have a single activity or screen to display information to the user. The more complex apps that we're going to build in the rest of the course will often require more than one activity. So now we're going to find out how to add a second activity to our app and switch and pass data between two activities. So here we go. I'll call this multiple activities demo, and we'll use our Marshmallow API, even though we could be doing this with a lower API. Nothing that we're doing here is Marshmallow specific. So here we go. Initially, to add a second activity is very, very easy. We just go to File, New, Activity, and then we just pick the activity that we want. If you want to look at the specific activities, then you can. So let's just quickly go to the gallery, and then this is what we're familiar with. We'll keep to a nice empty activity. So I'll call this second activity. We'll leave the layout name as activity second, and the package name is the same as before. So here we go. You can see we've now got two activities, and inside our layout folder, we've got two XML files to describe the two different activities. So now we've got our second activity. How are we going to access it from the first? We'll just run the app in the background to get things displaying. And don't worry about the rendering problems. That's just because things are still starting up. So I'm going to bring in a button. Doesn't really matter where we have it in the app. So just there, and this button is going to allow users to switch from the first activity to the second. So I'm going to change the text to jump to second activity, and we'll add in an onClick method of 2 second activity. Okay, I'll just drag that up a bit, and then we'll take a quick look at the second activity. So that's just blank at the moment, which is fine. All we want to do is to be sure that we have successfully jumped to the second activity. So then, over in the main activity Java file, we'll write our usual code to do something when that button is clicked. So public void 2 second activity called by our button view. And then we're going to write our code to jump to the second activity. And we do this by creating something called an intent. An intent is essentially something that changes the target of our code. So it might be jumping to a second activity or even to a different app. And I'm going to call the intent intent. And this is going to be a new intent within the application context. So it's within this app. And we want to jump to the second activity. So we're going to call that second activity. Well, it is called second activity dot class. So that will navigate to the second activity when we start this intent. And we do that using start activity using the intent that we've just created. So there we go. We should now be able to jump to the second activity. So here you can see our original app. Once that's built, it should update with the new button. Here we go. So let's tap that button, and you can see we jump to the second activity. So simple as that. Here's a quick challenge for you to practice doing that. Can you create a button on the second activity which jumps back to the first activity? Simple as that. Go for it. All right, hope you managed it. It really was very similar to what we've done already. So we'll drag in a button to the second activity. Back to main activity. We'll give it an on-click of back to main. And then over in the second activity.java file, we'll create our method. So public void back to main with our button view. And then we create our intent, which is a new intent using the application context. And this time we want to go back to main activity.class. And then finally we start that activity using the intent that we've just created. All right, so let's see that in action. The first activity should work as before, but the second activity will now have a button which links us back to the main activity. Here we go. So let's jump to the second activity and then back to the main activity, and there we go. So we can jump back and forward as many times as we like now. Great, so we've now got two activities and we can jump between them. Obviously we could extend that to as many activities as we like, but a common thing to want to do is to pass variables back and forth between the activities. So let's see how we do that. So let's say we've got a variable that we want to pass to the second activity from the first. We would take our intent and we would put an extra. So an extra bit of information with our intent. And we might have something like a username, and then that username might be Rob. Simple as that. Then in the second activity, when we want to receive that variable, we would actually go down to the onCreate method. So when the activity is displayed, and again we create an intent, and this one is going to get the intent that brought the user to this activity. And then let's create a quick toast, and we're going to display the value that we received. So it's get, and we have to specify the type of data. So we're sending and receiving a string. So it's get string extra. And the name of the variable that we want to get is username. Okay. So let's take a quick look at that. Now when we jump to the second activity, it should give us a little pop-up with the value of the variable that we've passed to it. And that's the best way to share data between different activities. Here we go. So jump to second activity, and there you see the Rob appeared for us there. All right. So now a fairly big challenge for you to put this together. A common use of two activities is to have in the main activity a table which shows, for example, a collection of usernames. And then when one of those is tapped on, it jumps to a second activity which allows you to send a tweet to that user or post a photo or whatever it might be. So the challenge is to remember how to set up a table within the first activity and then have the name of 4 friends in that table. And then when you tap on them, it simply in the second activity says hello to whoever that person was that the user tapped on. That's it. Best of luck. Pause the video and give it a shot. All right, I hope that went well. I'm going to start by getting rid of the 2-second activity, and also getting rid of the 2 user interface elements in the first activity. And now let's bring in our list view. So it's been a while since we've done one of these, but hopefully you remember how they work. So I'm going to drag in my list view here, and I'll give it an ID just of list view. There we go. Right, then we're going to go over to main activity and write some code to set up our list view. So first off, let's find it. So list view, and we'll call it list view here as well. We're going to want to cast this to a list view and find it by its ID, resources.id.listView. Then I'm going to create an array list of strings to represent my list of friends. And this is going to be a new array list of strings. Then I'll take my array list and add some names to it. So we'll start with Monica, maybe Chandler. You see where this is going. Joey, and Rachel. Sorry, Phoebe and Ross, but we only had room for 4. Right, now I've just got to get my array list to display on my list view. So if you remember, I create an array adapter, which I'll call array adapter. And this is going to be a new array adapter using this activity as the context. And then the format is going to be android.r.layout.simple_list_item1. And the array list that we're going to link it up with is friends. And then we set our adapter to attach to our list view. Great. So before we go any further, let's just quickly check that that's worked. We should now see on the main activity that we have a list of 4 friends in our list view. And there we go. Lovely. Now, of course, I can tap on them, but nothing will happen. So we now need some code to do something when an item is clicked on our list view. Again, we have done this before. So hopefully you remember, we use list view set on item click listener. And this is going to be a new adapter view dot on item click listener. And I've got a parenthesis out of place there. And now we'll allow Android Studio to implement the required method on item click. Wonderful. So that much we've done before. And then we just need to create our intent and jump to the second activity, passing the variable to it. So as before, create the intent. It's a new intent. Using the application context. And then we're going to jump to second activity dot class. Then we just need to add that extra bit of data to the intent. So we're going to put an extra. It's going to have a variable name of name, and the value is going to be friends dot get, and then we use the variable I here to represent the number of the row that the user has tapped on. And then we just start the activity intent. And we've got one small issue here. Ah, yes, because the friends array list is being accessed from an method here, we have to set the variable type to be final, so it can be accessed from within this method. Okay, so now all that remains is to write our code for second activity. And in fact, it's going to be very, very similar. The only difference is that the name that we want to display has a variable name of name this time rather than username. All right then, so let's give it a try. We should now be able to tap on any one of these four, and the variable name will be passed to the second activity, which will then display it as a toast. And there we go. Back to the main activity. We can try it again if we want to. Wonderful. Okay, so now you can add as many activities as you like. You know how to switch between them, and you also know how to pass variables between them. Now then, that takes us to the final app of this section, which is a pretty big one, the biggest you've built so far, in fact, and that is Memorable Places.